So today's session is called Balancing Uni and Life. I don't know if any of you were here for Matt's session earlier today. My colleague Matt, he was talking about understanding assignments and feedback. Some of you were there? Okay, cool. So this is another aspect of that. The Balancing Uni and Life one is really about, like, as it says in the title, how you're going to manage living alongside your studies. And the reason we run this session is that actually a lot of students put time management and managing, like, to balance their studies as their, like, primary concern when they start university. So hopefully today we can give you some good tips for making that transition. Before I get started though, I just want to acknowledge that I am standing here today and coming to you online from Ghana land, which is land that was never ceded. And I'd just like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Okay, so also preemptively, if I cough, I apologise, it's not COVID. I think I'm having some asthma issues which have resulted in some very fun and embarrassing coughing fits for my co-workers, but I have plenty of water here, so hopefully that won't happen. So yeah, balancing uni and life. So I don't know where you're all coming from, at what stage of life you're in, why you're here at uni, but whether you're brand new, coming from high school, maybe you've just landed here from overseas, you're an international student, perhaps you're coming back to uni after a period of, like, working in the workforce or maybe taking a gap year or anything like that. The transition to uni can be a big one. Some people will find it seamless, but if you don't, that's totally normal. You're going to probably experience a bit of a culture shock of being at university and the different kind of expectations that are placed on you. And there are ups and downs that come with it. And the ups are great and the downs are also normal and will pass. So it's important to, I guess, expect this to be a period of transition, especially if you haven't studied at university before. And it can feel a bit like a roller coaster, but you just kind of got to ride that wave. And I'll talk you through that. So yeah, it starts off a bit like a roller coaster. You're going to feel great, I hope. Excited to start your studies, maybe excited about being in a new environment, being actually on campus for your classes, given the last few years. You found your way here today, which is awesome, because campus can be a bit, I've been here now for about 11 years. I studied here as well, and there are still rooms that I don't know how to get to unless I absolutely have to try. So well done on making it here. This is a week where you probably feel quite, excited, anticipating starting, and then next week you have your first week with all your topics beginning, and you might start to feel a little overwhelmed. For me, it was always, week one was always a big one in the sense of you're not really doing work per se. You kind of have your first classes in every topic, and there are all those introductory classes where it's the awkward icebreakers, which are always fun, and you get given a lot of information about when your assessments are due, what you'll be covering, all of that stuff. So that's where I usually find I just get, my brain gets really fuzzy and I don't really know how to handle it because there's like 4 separate streams of information coming at me. I know that I have 4 or 5 pieces of assessment for each topic. Suddenly I have all these dates in my brain that I don't know what to do with. So be prepared for that if that is likely to happen to you. That first week is kind of cruisy in terms of workload, but it can be a bit of an information overload. But after that, you kind of, you'd have time to process things. We'll go through some ways of planning out your semester and everything. And then you enter into like weeks 2 and 3, and that's a bit cruisier. And then your first assessments come in, which can be the downward spiral again, and then you go up again. And anyway, it's a whole thing. And then next semester it starts all over again. So my main hope for you guys today in coming to this session is that you leave realising that those kinds of swings and roundabouts are normal and that they do pass, and everyone feels the stress of that transition, even if outwardly they don't necessarily show it. And the good news is that, like, there are tools that we'll talk through today that will help you manage these ups and downs. And you've already made an excellent decision just by coming to a session like this. You've been organised enough to get here, and that shows that you're probably going to do really well in terms of managing your time. So I just wanted to start with a poll. So we'll be doing it online. So if you've got access to the app, feel free to do it that way. Or also, if you like, for the people in the room, if you want to just call out some things. But I just want to know what other commitments you're all trying to balance alongside your university studies. Yes?
Part-time work.
Part-time work, that's a big one. Yep. I also work through my degree. It is, I think for most students, it is a critical one because, yeah, you have to live outside of university. Any other commitments that people can think of that they'll be trying to balance in their weekly schedule?
Running a scout group.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, okay, so volunteer commitments and like other like social activities. Anything else? Yeah?
Maybe moving out to a new home.
Yes, that is a huge, even if it's a kind of temporary, finite period of stress, it's a huge one, especially because apparently at the moment it's really impossible to find a rental place in Adelaide. Yeah?
Getting used to being in a new state.
Yes, yeah. So if Adelaide isn't like your hometown or you haven't been here before or you're only just here in the last few months or whatever, like it's a huge adjustment, like getting used to a new place at a new institution. I did some study overseas and just transitioning to a totally different environment and not knowing who to talk to and like being bounced around from person to person trying to get an answer. And then you've got a whole new life starting out with like, yeah, where your home is. All of that stuff is a huge thing that is going to probably take priority a lot of the time over your studies if, you know, those are critical needs you need to sort out. How's it going online?
At the moment, online, 24%, which is the largest, say work is the largest commitment, followed by 13% self-care, 15% family, 12% self-care, 8% carers responsibility, 8% social commitment, 8% sports exercise, and then the rest, travel 4%, hobbies 6%, and others 3%.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, online people. Yeah, I think, so work is a big one. Yeah, if you have families, if you have partners, if you have children that you're caring for, maybe you have care responsibilities for, you know, I don't know, for a while when I was studying, I was caring for my grandparents with my mum. All these things kind of, they take up your time. And so finding a way to like give a bit of your time to everything while not dropping your studies as well is really critical. So I guess the other point of doing that poll is kind of to show you that everyone's like trying to, no one is I mean, I think it's very unusual for someone to just be focusing on uni. If you're able to do that, that's really fantastic. But I think we all are at a point, particularly when we work here at Flinders, where we realise that you have a lot of other things going on in your lives. So we want to help you kind of navigate this transition. So today we're going to be talking through a few things. Due date tactics, which is where we're going to take a look at the whole of your semester ahead and use your due dates to kind of backwards map how you're going to submit your assignments on time. Then we're going to look at maximising your time, which is looking at the weekly view. So looking at your schedule on a weekly basis, you know, how are you going to fit in not only your contact hours for your studies, but, you know, your work schedule, when you get to go to the gym, just travel time to and from Flinders if you don't live very close. I still do, and when I was studying here, lived about a half hour to 45 minutes commute away. So by the time I drove to and from uni on the days that I had to come in, that added, you know, another 7.5 hours to my week. That was just in the car. And obviously during that time, you can't even study unless you have access to a really relevant podcast or something. So, you know, being aware of those things as well in terms of how you get your studies done. And then we'll move to assignments one bite at a time, which is zooming in even further to talking about individual assignments, how you can break them down into smaller parts so they don't seem so overwhelming. I am someone that struggles with that one a lot. If I have a big task in front of me, I tend to just shut down because it just seems like it's too overwhelming at the start. So there are some techniques that we can use to make that easier to start, and then you'll realise that it's easier to continue. So due date tactics. I'm sure that all of you have felt this way at some time or other. Due dates can cause stress and they are unavoidable at university. And what you will notice if you haven't already got a sense for is that they will actually cluster around the same time in semester. It's unfortunate. It's also kind of inevitable because you're doing 4 topics and everyone's trying to scaffold your learning, assess you at a particular time, get your grades finalised so you can move on to the next semester. So it is unfortunate, but it is inevitable that your assignments are going to come at the same time. So using your due dates, rather, instead of seeing them as a scary thing, you can actually use them as a tool to help you map out how you're going to approach your assignments and stay on track. So time management is really what we're talking about here. And this is it sounds like a kind of dull concept to talk about, but it's really complex actually, and it's related to patterns of behavior that if you are aware of in yourself, you can actually hack so that you can work better. So I'm talking about habits of, procrastination, putting things off until the last minute, maybe not having motivation to get started in the first place, overcommitting. I'm someone that will say yes to lots and lots of things and then inevitably find out I can't fit all of that in my life and will burn out. Perfectionism can be a really hard one. You strive to do really well, but it can also lead to paralysis of getting started in the first place. And avoidance, which is when you just pretend that your assignment doesn't exist in the first place. And you might recognise yourself in one or all of these. I tend to be negotiating one or all of them at any single given moment in a day. These aren't things that you just kind of fix. They are things that you learn to manage and work with to your advantage. So, to give you a bit of a sense of a university semester. So most courses are based on 13 to 14 week semesters. Some do have different schedules like nursing. And if we have any nursing students here, you're probably already in the middle of your studies. They would have started a little while ago. But if not, then 13 to 14 week semesters. Your mid-semester breaks will be usually around April and September. They are misleading. They are not actually, as you will learn very quickly, or if you speak to any student already here, you will learn they are not actually breaks. They are periods of time where you do not have to come to class, but you instead have to work on your assessment. So first weeks of semester are settling in and getting into that rhythm, finding out when everything is due, all of that. Weeks 6 to 7 are when your first bigger assessments are usually due. Although you may have some smaller pieces due in kind of weeks 2 or 3, depending on the topic. And then you get to weeks 10 to 14, and that's when you will feel, like everything is due at once, and you will feel like that dog in the meme. So this calendar here is an example of what you might look at when you get to those weeks 12 or 14. And it probably looks, it doesn't look too crazy right there. You got 3 things that are on different days. That's no big deal. But, pardon me, if this is the final piece of assessment that you're doing in semester, most likely you will be doing, say, like a 2,000-word essay or something like that. I'm basing this here on, my background is in creative writing. So I'm basing this on the kind of essay assignments that we would get. But even if you're in the sciences or something, you might have a lab report due. If you're in nursing, you might have a case study due or social work. So the point is that when you get to this point in the semester, things will be due one day after another. And while that seems manageable on paper, when you think about the amount of work and time and hours that you put into preparing for them, writing them and then submitting them, it's not all going to happen at once, and you're not going to be able to just focus on your women's studies essay due on Tuesday, and then within the next 24 hours turn around your creative writing critical reflections. So being aware that your schedule is misleading. So you might find the following tools helpful to manage that workload. So a diary is a good thing. It doesn't have to be paper. I use my phone calendar a lot. FUSA, Flinders University Student Association, down in the hub, also give out free, I think they still do give out free diaries. Yes, they do, thank you. At the start of O Week. So you can always pop by and grab one of them if you like things on paper. But a diary for that week-to-week view is really helpful. Then we've also got, and you might have seen these around campus too, these big like A3 semester planners. So they've got all the weeks, or the yearly planners actually, I think. I don't know, semester or yearly, they've got all the months kind of cascading down, so you can actually put in your due dates and see like across the 13 to 14 weeks of semester where everything is due. And then you'll also have your topic handbook, which will be made available to you on Flow through your various Flow sites, and your statement of assessment methods, also known as the SAM, which will outline, the number of hours you're meant to put into that topic each week, when your assessments are due, how much they are weighted towards your final grade. So, you can look at that and go, this thing that is 5% worth, I'm not going to spend as much time on than the thing that's 40% of my grade. So all those things together will help you plan out. And I would, depending on what your preference is, my approach would be to sit down in that first week and really map this out so that you have a visual representation of what you need to get done. It's also helpful because once you know when things are due, you can backward map. And if you haven't heard of that term before, it means basically working backwards from completion to get something done. So, if you have your assignment due in week 14 and it's an essay, you might start bearing in mind your other pieces of smaller assessment. You might say, okay, well, a month before that's due, I'm going to start researching. So I'm just going to spend some time searching for peer-reviewed literature, making some notes about what I've read, and then maybe 3 weeks out, I will sit down and write an outline for my essay. Then 2 weeks before, I'll start writing. I'll have a full draft done by 1 week before, then I can spend that time editing, proofreading, revising as needed. So that's what we mean by backward mapping. Okay, so moving forward into that kind of weekly view then, now that you know what your semester is going to look like, it's good to then zoom into the weekly timetable because you probably all have a sense of where you need to be at any given time. But when you start semester, you will have certain contact hours for maybe four different topics, unless you're studying part-time, it might be less. And it might look like you actually have a lot of free time. And I don't want to put the fear into you and make you assume that you're never going to have a life outside of uni. But if you have, say, 2 to 8 contact hours per week for your topics, your week might look like you're only at university maybe 1, 2, 3 days a week at various and some of them will be half days. So you might think that it's actually pretty easygoing and that you don't have to that you're going to be able to find it easy to keep up with everything. Those are just the contact hours though for your lectures and your tutorials or workshops or seminars, whatever it is that you have for your degree. And then outside of that, you're actually expected to complete quite a bit of independent study, which includes preparing for your next classes, which will involve reading, which there is a lot of at university. And I know a lot of people don't like it, but reading's awesome, but it is a lot at university. So you need to be prepared for it. It will take longer because you're not reading, something that you actually enjoy necessarily. It's going to be denser academic work. So, on top of the contact hours you have for that week, you need to be setting aside time to complete that reading. I have done this before, it does not work. If you think I will just do the reading the night before class, I guarantee you that you will open up a document that is 18 pages long, that is full of dense academic literature, and you are going to go, nah, I'm not going to get this done before class tomorrow. So bear that one in mind. Then there's the time that you need to spend on your assessments, maybe working through modules on Flow. So that's all the university-related stuff that you need to fit in beyond those 2 to 8 contact hours per topic per week. Then, you have part-time work that you're trying to fit in. Then you have the commute that you make to and from university. Then you have dinners with your family or with your partner, or sporting activities that happen on the weekend. Or maybe you just really like playing video games and you want to dedicate time to that as well, which is awesome. These are all things that you need to build into your schedule as well. So being realistic about that, and again, maybe in that first week, actually mapping that out on your weekly planner can be really helpful. It is always okay for the plan to change. You might say, I'm going to be really ambitious. If I work 7 hours on Sunday, then I'll study for 4 hours in the evening, and that's how I'll make up the time. That's great if that works for you. If it doesn't, just remember that your plan can change. So don't be overwhelmed if it doesn't work the first time around. Things are always uncomfortable the first time we try them. So my point here is that be flexible. You are trying to find the plan that works for you, not the plan that you have to work to necessarily. So we've talked about the uni timetable being misleading. We've talked about the additional hours you need to put in after class. Then we get into this idea of like, okay, so how do we use our time effectively? Just with a show of hands, does anyone do the whole like cramming for many, many hours thing before they have to, I don't know, do an exam or test or something? Yeah? Has that worked for you very well?
Surprisingly, yeah, it depends what it is. Depends how driven I am to do well, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so pulling the all-nighter thing and like cramming and stuff, I mean, it's probably like a decent last resort, but I would say use it as a last resort. There have been studies that show that our brains have like a good 1 to 2 hours in them before they lose focus. So setting aside study periods strategically of like 1 to 2 hours and building in maybe 30-minute breaks around them is really helpful. If 1 to 2 hours sounds daunting to you, it would to me, then there's also the Pomodoro technique, which you can Google and have a look into, where you basically do study sessions of 20 minutes, where you try and achieve a very concrete thing in those 20 minutes, and then you take a 10-minute break. You try and do 5 of those within a day or something like that. So if 20 minutes sounds more manageable than 2 hours, that's also an option. And that might be a good option with reading if you find it hard to sit down and read for 2 hours as well. But the point is that if you say, I'm just going to like pull an all-nighter, I just have to do it, and that's the way I'm going to get things done, it has diminishing returns. You will get distracted, you will lose focus, you're not going to retain as much information as you need to. So being strategic can be really helpful. And if you can get on top of that at the start, then hopefully you won't be pulling those all-nighters at the end. So I've already talked about, topic contact hours, your independent study time. So after this session, perhaps next week, I would really encourage you to outline your weekly schedule. Factor in all those little things like travel time, like that, it might seem like you're really micromanaging your life for this plan. And obviously things change, but even factoring in, it takes me half an hour to shower and get ready in the morning or whatever, so that you can be realistic about how much time you actually have in a given day. And then, I guess, in the time that you have free around that, build in free time for yourself, because that's important, but working out when you're going to fit in those study sessions. Part of that is also working out what works for you. So I will talk about this a little bit more, but I'm someone whose brain works better in the morning. So you're getting the best version of myself right now in the afternoon. But I do work better in the morning, so I'm more switched on. And so that's when I tend to do my work. And then when I get to the afternoon, I do things like answer emails. In your case, if you're working on uni work, it might be the afternoon that you use for reference formatting, because that is low stakes cognitive activity, but it's still something you have to do. And so you might as well do a rote kind of mechanical task in that time. But I guess when it comes to the study sessions, working out when you work best and then working out what you actually want to achieve in that study session is really important. Don't sit down and just go, I've got an essay to do, I'll spend 2 hours on it and that'll be good, and then I'll spend another 2 hours on it later. Think about what you want to achieve in that time. Do you want to create an outline for your essay? Maybe you're not even there yet. Do you want to read 2 to 3 articles in that time period and make some notes about it? So actually having those concrete tasks, I guess, having those concrete tasks that you want to tick off. So then we get into what we call assignments 1 bite at a time. And this is where I'm going to talk to you about a technique called chunking. So It's an ugly name, but it's a great technique. So when you are faced with assessments, maybe they won't, like if this is all, if it doesn't seem like it's going to feel overwhelming to you, like that's awesome, and I'm really happy to hear that. But for me, it was always like sitting down, looking at an essay question and just being like, I don't really know how to get started on this. It's too hard. I will clean my house before I deal with it. And it's not because I love cleaning, I can tell you that much. So there is a lot to think about when you start something, you know, thinking about what you're going to say, thinking about the research that you need to do, the kind of conventions of academic writing that you might be finding new to you, let alone actually understanding what you're reading and being able to put it into your own words and create your own arguments. So if you feel anxious when you sit down to write something, that's totally okay, that is normal. However, it can be a problem if that is something that prevents you from getting started in the first place. So that's when we use a technique called chunking, which, as it kind of indicates, you break a task down into smaller chunks. So that's what I'm kind of referring to when I say, what do you want to achieve in a study session? Do you want to have read 2 articles? Because by the end of that study session, you can see that you've concretely done something. It feels less daunting to move on to the next thing. I actually use this tactic when I mark student assignments as well, because I've been doing a lot of that lately. And if I have a group of, say, 20 students sitting down at the start of a work day to mark 20 essays, seems like it's going to take a long time. So if I go, okay, I just want to get 2 done before lunch or whatever, I consider myself having done well. And it does, then I can go, I've only got 18 left to do. So it does work, at least for me. And when you combine chunking with your well-planned map to completion, so, you know, when you incorporate the chunking method into like, all right, I'm going to start 4 weeks out from my assessment and just do the reading or something, it can really help you make those small steps so that any assignment really is just a series of smaller tasks. So, I mean, I guess an example of how I would use this technique, so if I had an essay due, I would chunk it by kind of like I've talked about, you know, deciding when I'm going to do the reading, when I'm going to do the planning, all of that. But even taking it to that micro level of like, okay, I'm only going to sit and read for 30 minutes. When you start research, this is my experience, when you start researching a topic, you're going to come up with a whole lot of literature to sift through to the point where you're probably just kind of either keeping like a million tabs open on your computer or downloading a bunch of PDFs that you're never really going to read. So being systematic and going, okay, 30 minutes on this one article, done. That's what we mean by chunking. It is also a really good way of reducing that anxiety around sitting down and getting started. I think one of the hardest things that I've done study-wise is writing a thesis, and it can be very overwhelming to sit down and like manage a really huge project, and seeing every essay that you're kind of doing as managing a mini project of that size is really important because you are kind of studying to become project managers as well as studying in your actual discipline. So bear that in mind, because once you graduate, you're going to have a whole range of skills in time management and organisation and everything. And I guess then that would just lead me back to kind of suggesting or encouraging you to really think about when you work best. Some people work really well at midnight. I cannot do that unless I'm anxious and kind of wired or something. I work best in the morning, so think about when you work best. Think about the time period that you're willing to spend on a particular task. So, you know, if you know I get distracted really easily, there's no way I'm going to sit down for an hour and read, then do it in bursts of 10, 20, 30 minutes, whatever works for you. Also get used to the emotional workflow of your semester. So what I mean by that is it can be really helpful to start paying attention to the way the process of completing an assignment feels. I have now become very aware that when I start something, usually I have an idea and I'm excited, and then I start doing the research and I feel tired and overwhelmed and fatigued because it feels like I'm sifting through a bunch of information that either doesn't make sense to me or it is overwhelming in the amount of reading I think I have to do. So my brain kind of shuts down, and then I avoid even once I've done the research, then I avoid the writing stage because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I want things to be right as soon as I put them on the page. And then I get over that hurdle and I start writing and I feel horrible about everything that I've written. And then I start to feel okay about what I've written. And then I'm like, this is great. And then I put it aside and I come back and it's horrible again. And then it's great. And then I submit it. Anyway, I go through that cycle every single time I write something. I have not learned out how to not have those kind of waves of emotion. I just learned that they are natural and part of it. So probably when I'm feeling like what I've written is awful, it's just because I'm in that phase and it's not because I should give up on the assignment. So yeah, getting a sense for physically when you work best and then emotionally, being prepared for those ups and downs so that when you come across them, you don't feel defeated by them. You just kind of go, oh, right, all right. Well, in a few days, this is probably going to be not how I'm feeling about it anymore. I might pause there really quickly. And I was meant to do this earlier, but give you guys a chance to ask questions. So both online and in the room. Do you have any questions about anything that I've talked about so far? Or anything related to balancing uni that you feel hasn't been kind of covered by anything you've done this week yet? Also give Tio a moment to see if there's anything online.
There is a question online, and it's asking whether there are any social media groups for students in Flinders University,
Yes.
like WhatsApp or Facebook.
Okay, yes, there are. Obviously, if you are on Instagram, then follow Hey Flinders is the account. It's Hey, one word, _ then Flinders. That is the kind of student-facing account of Flinders where they will let you know things that are happening around campus. There's also the official Flinders University account, which is the more corporate side of things. So follow both and you'll be kept up to date on what's happening. The more informal side of things, if you haven't heard of it already, is a Facebook group called Overheard at Flinders. And that's where you can go to ask questions about your topics. It's where people go to complain about parking on campus. So Overheard at Flinders on Facebook is probably a very good network to be a part of, just so that you can actually ask each other questions and get solutions as well. So yeah.
Another question came from Holly, and this question is, when is a good time to do readings?
Ooh, okay, Holly. So that's when I would say working out when you work best. I like reading. So like I said, my brain works best in the morning. So unless I'm trying to write an assignment, because I would rather use my brain power to write, I will use the morning to read because that's when I'm fresh and I can actually take in what I'm reading. When you're balancing 4 subjects or however many, each week you're going to have a set of readings that you need to do. The reading load will vary depending on what you're studying. So, I know my experience was very different in English literature courses. We would read at that stage maybe a novel every 2 weeks or something. Other times in sciences you might have academic articles that you have to read. So getting a sense of, I would say one way to approach it is writing down what you need to read at the start of every week, having a quick look at it to see how long it is and how dense it is. And then if you find it hard to stay focused on reading, I would set aside those kind of 20 to 30 minute sessions where you just sit down, read, then take a break. As for when to do it though, it's really about when you find it best to kind of retain information. I wouldn't suggest doing it late at night the day before class, although look, inevitably I think we will all, you will all have done that by the end of your degree. But yeah, just trying to be kind of consistent and steady with your readings instead of expecting to be able to get them all out of the way in one day.
There is another question from Rebecca. Rebecca has children and she believes that the library will be more useful to her, for her to work in. So she knows that the library is open 24/7, but she asked if there is a need to book a space in the library.
Oh, good one. No, so the library is open 24/7. There are bookable spaces if you want to get together with a study group and be social. there are rooms that you can book through the Flinders Library website, but you can also just show up and find a place to sit. And depending on the level of focus you want to have, the ground floor of the library is a very social space, so you can talk and not be as loud as you like, but you can certainly talk with your friends and kind of have those conversations. And then the higher you go up, you find the quieter zones where they've got like little individual desks that you can sit at, and they're really good to go to as well. I can also vouch for taking a nap at them if you're looking for a quiet space on campus to do that. So yeah.
Emily asked Emily is working part-time and she's wondering how many days a week she should schedule off so that she can focus on uni.
Emily, are you studying? Again, this is going to be kind of like, I won't have an answer for you necessarily, but if you're studying full-time, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if anyone else has any advice on this, but I think if you're studying full-time, then really you're going to be assuming that it's like a full-time job, so Monday to Friday, putting in those kinds of full-time hours for it is not, but I mean, that's not always realistic. Like, we do need to work. So I would say if it's a full-time, like, yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, so I have managed part-time work with this kind of thing before, and typically I will only allow myself during the week, it's like a 5-hour shift max. Like, I always put a limit on it. So I'll maybe work 5-hour shifts once or twice in the week, and then in the weekend, that's when I can get most of my contract hours done.
Okay.
Like, focus more on, put most of your hours on the weekend, and let your week be either small blocks or just maybe once on a Monday or a Tuesday, and let the rest of that be for your studies.
Yeah, okay, so Emily, if you didn't hear that, or I don't know if Tia was typing in, we had a student say that they tend to block out like a 5-hour shift for working, and kind of keep it to that limit so that then on the weekends they'll do contract work, but it means that the week they can dedicate to studying. Am I paraphrasing?
If you've got a 15-hour contract, put 10 hours for the weekend, 5 hours spread out somewhere in the week.
Right.
Or a 20-hour contract, 10 hours on the weekend, 2 blocks of 5.
Okay, yeah. So if you are trying to, I don't know if you're trying, Emily, to actually like reach a certain quota of work hours, but if you are working part-time, say 15 to 20 hours a week, then yeah, using your weekend for those big chunks of like working time and then trying to keep your week free or for shorter shifts, like 5 hours at a time.
So
Yeah.
you don't want to get burnt out.
You do not want to get burnt out. You will learn very quickly if that does happen though, and then I would just say you just need to reassess how long you're giving to work, or vice versa, because, let's be realistic, you need to be able to afford to live. So yeah, seeing how you go. Any other?
No, there are no more questions, but if I may add to the conversation, it also depends on your load, as in like how much are you studying, how many topics are you studying per semester. So if you find that you're taking too many topics and you need to balance that with your work, you might want to consider reducing the number of topics, which of course will have an effect on extending the course of your program or the period of the program. But that may be the best solution for you in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. Like being willing to reassess and go like, maybe I need to drop a topic, do only 3, 2 or whatever, is well worth doing, because, it'll mean that your studies take a bit longer overall, but like at least your mental health won't be suffering for it. Any other questions in the room? Cool. Well, all right. So I'm kind of wrapping up. So I don't know if you have any questions about what uni's like. I guess I just want to reiterate that like how you're feeling is normal. I don't even know how you're feeling, but I can guarantee you it's normal. And also just to say that your journey through university is going to be very specific to you. So there is no one way to complete your degree. As an example, I studied full-time for 4 years, and that was fine. But for example, I didn't make friends in my course for 2.5 years. So if you find that you start university and it feels quite transient or isolating, reach out for help. But also don't be alarmed, because everyone's journey through here is different. And maybe your journey will be that you make friends on day one, but your studies are really stressful and you find that's your challenge to manage or whatever. So if you have a question of like, what's uni like? Yeah.
How did you go about, like, what would your best tip be for like retaining the information that you read? Like, you're not particularly enthused about reading something, but you start to read it. How did you go about actually like keeping that information in and not forgetting it like as soon as you stop needing it?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so there's a couple of things I would do. The first thing is whenever you read anything for your topic, I would say take notes at the same time. Or not just even take notes, but there's this other version of that we call note making, which is know the purpose, know why you're reading a certain article. So if you're reading it, say, just because it's part of your class, then look to the tutorial that you're doing that week, and if there are specific questions that you're going to be asked about, or if there's a theme to the tutorial, because then you can read your that article with that in mind and actually pay attention for that information. The same thing goes if you're reading something to write an essay. If you know what your position is in response to your essay, then when you read an article, make notes about like, okay, this part here supports my position, so I'll probably use this, in my essay, so that when you go back to writing your essay or tutorial, whatever, you're not kind of like, oh man, like where was it in the article? Why? I remember something being useful, but I don't remember why. So note-taking, note-making is really helpful. When you've got a lot of reading to do, there's something called the 5-point reading plan, which is basically a way of very quickly working out if what you're reading is relevant to you and if you need to read it. So this is less applicable to your class readings because obviously they've been set for a reason, so you have to read them and for discussion and such. But if you're researching something and you're like, there's like 50,000 articles here and I just don't know which ones are relevant, then look up the 5-point reading plan. It means basically you're systematic about how you go about your reading. So you start by reading the title, you read the abstract, and you see, okay, does this sound like it's going to be relevant to me? If the abstract sounds like it's going to be relevant, you might read the introduction and the conclusion of the article. And again, assess, is this article about what I thought it was going to be about? Do I think I need to read it more carefully to like get information? If yes, and then you go on and you skim the article in full and you look for keywords that are relevant to you. Again, if you find it to be relevant, then you might read it in more detail and make notes on it. And of course, if at any of those stages you go, oh, you know what, this isn't actually about what I thought it would be, then you discard and you don't bother reading it, and that saves you time you would have spent otherwise. So yeah, that would be my main advice. Make notes they don't have to be super fancy or like legible even, but they need to make sense to you. And then, yeah, the 5-point reading plan as well is a really helpful one. We have resources on this as part of, so I'm from this, I should have said this, my name is Grace and I'm from the Student Learning Support Service. So we are based in the library at Flinders. We have a bunch of resources that include how to read effectively at uni on our Flow site, which you will all be automatically enrolled in as students. So when you log into Flow, it should appear there as the Student Learning Support Service. And if you log in, you'll have access to all our resources through what's called the Learning Toolkit. They're also publicly available on the Flinders website, but yeah, if you go to the Learning Toolkit and just have a play around and see where you get navigated to, you can find a bunch of resources, yeah.
Is that Learning Lounge out of date, or is that just not open to us?
No, oh yeah, that shouldn't say. Don't worry about that. The Learning Lounge is open, and when semester starts up, there are learning advisors on level 2 of the library in what's known as the Commons area, from 10:30 to 12, and then from 12:30 to 2:30, Monday to Friday. So if you have a question about an assignment you've been given, or if you want help checking that you understand a reading that you've done, or if you want help planning out your weekly schedule or something like that, come and chat to one of our advisors. It's just a drop-in service, so you don't need to make an appointment. I'll just run through a couple of other things. So that's our Learning Lounge. We also offer Studiosity. So this is online 24/7 support. So if you can't get onto campus, or if you have a question in the middle of the night, then Studiosity is available to you as well. You log in online. You get 10 interactions per semester at this stage, as far as I'm aware. So what I would say is be strategic about when you use that service. So if you have questions for Studiosity, I would, collect them together to try and ask them all in one interaction, because then you can save it up and use them in a valuable way. You can also submit up to 1,500 words of a draft of your assignment and get feedback on that as well. So if you want feedback before you submit your final assignment, make use of that. And then you're at the Ready2Go session, so you don't need to know about that. EndNote, if you haven't heard of it yet, you may hear about it at some point. I would say don't worry about it too much at this stage, but EndNote is a referencing software system. So basically, once you work out how to use EndNote, it can automatically generate references and keep them in a library for you to use with your assignments. This is more used by postgraduates when they're writing kind of longer theses and stuff like that. But if you happen to download it, it's free to students. It can be a really helpful tool to make referencing easier, but there is a learning curve. So just be aware of that. It's probably best to start learning how to reference manually and then move to EndNote. But if you do use EndNote, then we also have workshops that are run at regular stages as well, where you can come in and ask questions about it too. So I think that's more or less it from me. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap up about anything? Or online? Cool. Well, good luck with everything. If you do, I guess, if you feel stressed at any point, that's when I would say that's what we're here for. So come see us in the Student Learning Support Service, because we can kind of direct you in the right direction if we're not the support service that you need, but we can also help you with your studies and any academic questions. So good luck, enjoy. Don't worry if it feels a bit overwhelming, and be excited as well. It's great, you're starting uni.